One of the things that made Andrew Jackson a very powerful politician was he had found a way to get to 51% relatively easily. And part of that goes back to a political party, a political caucus, a modern-day party like you and I would recognize. Now, I need you to understand that there were people that just could not stand the sight of Andrew Jackson. He ruffled a lot of feathers. And people used to refer to him as King Andrew the First, a brutal, well, maybe not brutal, but certainly a dictator, okay? And so Jackson is giving rise to a wave of opposition in American politics. The problem is this opposition is all over the map when it comes to its organization. They don't have a platform. They don't have a political party, okay? That's going to change in the late 1830s with the establishment of the Whig Party, W-H-I-G, Whig Party. The Whigs are no longer with us, but many of the Republican Party's ancestors can trace their roots back to the Whig Party, including Abraham Lincoln. So anyway, the Whig Party is really established in the late 1830s, and it's designed to counterbalance the Democratic, big D, Democratic Party's worldview, especially in American politics. Let me give you a quick example. One of the things that a lot of people disliked about Andrew Jackson is he fired every member of his predecessor's cabinet. I mean, they just were shed left and right. Now, I know that doesn't sound all that remarkable to me or you, considering most president-elects do exactly that before they have even been inaugurated. But back during this time, there's a lot of people that said consistency is a good thing. We're going to keep the Secretary of Defense. We're going to keep the Secretary of Treasury, that kind of attitude. Jackson replaced all of these cabinet members with people that were essentially his drinking buddies, people that helped him get elected. And, people on the opposite side of Jackson called that corruption. They called it cronyism. Jackson called it rotation. And he said, look, if you've got a big problem with me rotating my presidential cabinet, then win, because winning has its benefits, okay? And when you win, you'll replace my guys, and this is going to be healthy. He called it rotation in the sense that you're going to get fresh sets of eyes in there, fresh blood that maybe are going to bring something that wasn't brought to the first set, okay? Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about Whig ideology. The Whig worldview, the Whig platform, was a celebration of the entrepreneurial spirit and an inspiration and an enthusiasm for industry. In other words, they were all for individual rights, but they were also for this collective individualism, something that emphasized that if we work together as a political society, as an economy, we can make this world better for all of us. So, one of the earliest converts to the Whig Party would be Henry Clay, who wanted to build roads and bridges and canals and, banks and everything that might be kind of controversial now, but over the course of time would clearly pay benefits, okay? Or dividends, rather. Now, the Whigs are not the only people that are at work during this period. You also are seeing the establishment of other political organizations, including the Working Man's Party, okay? And so, once again, people have come to the realization that when government acts and makes decisions, makes policies, a lot of times it's going to empower one group, and sometimes that'll be at the expense of another group. And so the Working Man's Party, as you might imagine, is a collection of working-class Americans that want the government to do things like legalize the formation of unions. They want the government to mandate that you could only work people X amount of hours a day. I mean, you insert the number there. There's a lot of different diversity when it comes to what that magic number was going to be. But anyway, what this does, whether you're talking about the Whig Party, the Working Man's Party, whatever the case may be, is it really does demonstrate that there is strength in numbers. And so Jackson, he no longer has this monopoly on political parties. That leads us into the election of 1836. In 1836, Andrew Jackson hand-selected the guy that was going to take over the reins for not only the Democratic Party, but also the presidency, and that would be Martin Van Buren, okay? Now, Van Buren wins an easy election in the first time that the Whigs are going to run in any kind of really notable election. He wins the popular vote handily, but the problem, I say that there's trouble on the horizon, The problem is the Whigs ran 5 different individuals. So if you think about it, the last time we had 2 Republicans running against 1 Democrat, the Democrat won. And before that you had 2 Democrats running against 1 Republican, the Republican won. Anytime you split the votes like that, anytime there's more than one of a particular party on the ballot, it really makes it favorable to the opposition party. Okay? So, while you definitely were defeated in 1836, you feel pretty good about yourself if you're a Whig. You ran 5 different guys, and you came within 1 or 2 percentage points of tying the guy that was hand-selected by a very popular president, whose Democratic Party was the incumbent party, the party of power. Okay. Anyway, let's talk just briefly about the presidency of Martin Van Buren. Van Buren inherited the mess that really was Andrew Jackson's decision to veto the bank. Henry Clay's prediction that if he were to take down the bank, the economy would come down with it, it turned out to be true. It just took a little while longer than Clay had anticipated. It all comes crashing down in 1837 in a process known as the Panic of 1837. I need you to understand that that is an economic depression. Okay, what really happened was credit dried up. After Andrew Jackson had taken down the Bank of North America, he seized its assets and deposited them, the money, I mean, in various what he called pet banks, hand-selected by him. Well, these banks made fairly significant amount of bad decisions, bad loans, loaning to people that didn't pay them back, and when they defaulted on their loans, the bank was left standing holding the bag there. Long and short of it is, in the aftermath of these decisions, they were far more reluctant to make additional loans, put more money out there on the street. And so when credit dried up, demand dried up with it. And when demand dried up, manufacturers simply said, we no longer need the levels of output that we once upon a time did, so therefore I'm going to start laying people off. And when people got laid off, they spent less money, and you can see it's a downward spiral. People were out of work, they spent less, demand went down again, it signaled to employers you don't need the same levels of production, and they laid more people off. Okay? There are a few silver lining victories for working people in the Van Buren presidency, however, including the legalization of some federal unions. Some federal employees are able to form unions, and maybe even more importantly, a 10-hour workday for federal employees. Okay? Now, again, that does not sound like a whole lot, considering, one, we've lived with the standard 8-hour day for, your lifetime, my lifetime. It's nothing new. And 2, a 10-hour workday seems like, a lot by our standards. Okay? Need you to understand that the government didn't say anything to people like Francis Cabot Lowell or Sam Slater when it comes to how long or how hard or how much they could work their workers. I mean, the sky was really the limit, and the idea was if you're a bad employer, if you have a bad reputation, your employees are just going to leave you and they're going to go somewhere where they're treated better. Okay? So the 10-hour workday really is kind of a breakthrough for working people, considering the government didn't do that kind of thing before the Van Buren presidency. But anyway, Van Buren is a marked man in 1840, the election of 1840. Any time that the economy tanks, it's got to be the president that gets blamed for it, right? Then, now, every time in between. So this is a golden, tailor-made opportunity for the Whigs. They are a brand new party. They had some momentum going into the election of 1836, and this is really your opportunity to take this to the next level. What they did in 1840 is they reduced down from 5 to 1. They now only have 1 candidate, and they made him a household name, William Henry Harrison. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because Harrison was the war hero of the Battle of Tippecanoe. He was the guy that had defeated the Native Americans that were becoming stronger and stronger and stronger in 1812. Okay? So if there's one thing that Americans love to do, whether you're talking about the 19th century or our modern times, it's elect military heroes. So this makes him a very viable candidate. Now, as his running mate, they selected a guy from South Carolina that despised Andrew Jackson and well, really maybe not the Democratic Party, but he despised Andrew Jackson, a guy by the name of John Tyler. So, very similar to how the Democrats gave Andrew Jackson a nickname, Old Hickory, the Whigs gave Harrison a nickname, Tippecanoe. I mean, who couldn't remember Tippecanoe? Who couldn't be swept up with a feeling of patriotism from the hero of the Battle of Tippecanoe? And what's better is it rhymed. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. It was really, really a good jingle, and it was a very effective way of getting people to remember who they were supposed to vote for on Election Day. Well, you don't have to be a political scientist to understand what's about to happen. William Henry Harrison wins this thing by a landslide, and the Whigs are very close to turning the corner when it comes to competing on an equal footing with the Democrats. The problem, and it is a problem, Harrison was a very old man when he was inaugurated. I mean, he was, as a matter of fact, he was well into his 60s. And he was the oldest man to be inaugurated in the 19th century. Take that and compile it with the fact that it was a relatively rainy, cold day in Washington when he was inaugurated. He insisted on making the speech. He caught a nasty cold, and because he was kind of too old to fight it off, he died. Right? So 30 days into his presidency, we don't get Tippecanoe, we get Tyler too. And John Tyler, for your notes, was a Whig primarily because Andrew Jackson was a Democrat. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they agreed on 99% of the rest of the way that the country should work. It's just, that 1%, that idea of rotation, that idea that Andrew Jackson was threatening civil war with John Tyler's native South Carolina, that he never got over that, right? So anyway, Tyler is a Democrat rather, in Whig's clothing. So every time that Henry Clay, who in 1840 assumes he's finally got his guy in a position of authority, every time Henry Clay goes to pass a law, John Tyler vetoes it. I mean, he's basically a reincarnation and a Whig version of Andrew Jackson. So the simple fact of the matter is, the Whigs really messed this up by selecting John Tyler as the Tippecanoe's running mate. Okay? In 1844, the Democrats have enough time to reorganize, re-recruit, and get everybody back on the same page in terms of popular politics. Okay? The Whigs are not really going to have a viable candidate. I mean, they can't rely on Tyler. He's not really a Whig. But they don't really have anybody nearly as mainstream as somebody like a William Henry Harrison. And so what's going to happen in 1844 is not only are the Democrats going to win the election, James K. Polk is going to be elected, you're also going to see the Democratic Party become the dominant party, the majority party in American politics. I mean, this tends to ebb and flow. I mean, our modern times are a little bit different, but from 1844 to 1860, it was the Democratic Party that was the majority party. They typically controlled Congress, and they typically were in the White House. And then from 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln, to 1932, you had the Republican Party that was the dominant party. Again, they controlled Congress, usually the presidency, and more importantly, the political talking points, the rhetoric, the political culture really favored the Republican brand versus the Democratic brand. And then in 1932, with the election of Franklin Roosevelt, it's going to be the Democrats that return to their position of authority and dominance, and they're going to dominate American politics all the way to the late 1960s, 1968, for instance. Okay? So anyway, this is not going to be the last time that we talk about political transitions in this class, but hopefully you can understand how this process of industrialization has really led people to kind of hedge their bets when it comes to political parties and political consciousness. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about the cultural side of the process of industrialization and what this is doing to American culture.